President Trump went into last night's State of the Union with the lowest approval rating of his second term in office. CBS News polling shows that 40% of Americans approve of his job performance. That is a 13% dip from his approval rating roughly 1 year ago. Let's bring in our panel. Joel Payne is a CBS News political contributor and Democratic strategist. Terry Sullivan is also a CBS News political contributor and previously served as the campaign manager for Secretary of State Marco Rubio's 2016 presidential campaign. Both friends of this broadcast. Good to see you guys.
And friends with each other.
Exactly. Yes. Friends with each other.
Sometimes. Sometimes.
All right. So, Terry, let's start with the president's approval rating. It felt to me as if this speech was a celebration for his supporters, the MAGA coalition, the members of Congress who have marched in lockstep with everything that this president has said and done. But State of the Union. Yeah. Everybody, I felt there were people who were left out of what he was talking about. Even though he tried to paint a picture, oh, look at this, woman who's getting, a deal on her drugs and another woman who's, but it didn't feel like if it was a unifying speech.
Well, first of all, he was restricted by time. He wasn't able to talk very long. No, look.
That's good. That's a good one.
Look, it is, he showed how average Americans are impacted by his policies in an effective way, in my opinion. Whether you agree with the policies or not, he was able to say, look, this family is paying less in taxes because of my policies. Mm-hmm. And so I think that kind of way, sure, you got to play to your base a little bit, but I do think he reached out on the important issues to Americans, which securing our border and immigration is an important issue to Americans and partly why he got elected. Lower taxes, an important issue, kitchen table issue for Americans. And so showing those things. And look, by Donald Trump standards, he stayed on message and was more disciplined than probably any other speech I've seen in recent memory.
Yeah, a lot of people were watching to see what he was going to say about the Supreme Court justices. Right. He was pretty restrained on that. I was surprised to see so many of them skip out. I mean, what's the protocol there? And I mean, Neil Gorsuch, why was Clarence Thomas not there?
So I think historically, and I'm not a judicial expert here, but I think historically a lot of them don't go as because of their view of separation. My understanding is separation of the powers. Oh. So this is not a partisan thing or one party or the other. It's their view of government.
So let's talk about the Democrats, the people who were sitting cozy in their seats for most of the night. Joel, the president had plenty to say about Democrats. Let's play that first, and then we'll talk about it afterwards.
Yeah. These people are crazy, I'm telling you. They're crazy. Democrats are destroying our country, but we've stopped it just in the nick of time, didn't we? You should be ashamed of yourself not standing up. You should be ashamed of yourself. There's drug lords, murderers all over our country. They're blocking the removal of these people out of our country, and you should be ashamed of yourself.
Ilhan Omar there shouting, "You killed Americans" at the president. Other Democrats didn't show up. Others were protesting while his speech was going on. Is there a unified position with Democrats to take on this president? And, how do you think Democrats fared in all of this last night?
Yeah, it's a good question. And so I should share this to make sure the viewers know this. I work with Move On. Move On was one of the groups that actually organized a boycott of the speech. There were about 30 Democrats in the Senate and the House that joined, brought their people who would be their guests at the State of the Union to join. I share that for context to say, I think that felt like a lot of the energy behind this speech was either I'm going to go and I'm going to mostly listen and not have a lot to say, or I'm not going to go. Last year, I think you saw a more wide variance of responses, people holding up signs, people doing things, people walking out. I think the aperture was a little bit narrower this year, and I do think that Democrats probably were a bit more precise in how they pushed back on Trump this time around. And I think what you just saw, that montage you played from Donald Trump, is the reason why a lot of Democrats chose to skip out. Because you essentially have a choice to make. If you are there in that chamber and Donald Trump is gaslighting and is lying and is not offering a version of reality that you or your constituents are experiencing, what do? Do you not stand up and applaud for folks who otherwise you would be supportive of? No, that is not an enviable position to be in as a public servant. And I think that's why you saw a lot of Democrats chose to do that. And I'll be honest with you, I think there's a good chance that the State of the Unions that we are used to, the form of all the people from the opposing party coming to a State of the Union and everyone coming together in a chamber under one roof, I think that might be a bygone thing within the next 5 or 10 years.
So let's talk about the immigration policies that the president attempted to defend last night during the State of the Union. At one point, he said this.
If you agree with this statement, then stand up and show your support. The first duty of the American government is to protect American citizens, not illegal aliens.
CBS News polling shows 54% of Americans disapprove of the president's deportation programs. This is a question for both of you. One, that question, it was clearly meant to bait the Democrats, and they were stuck between a rock and a hard place, right? I mean, yes, the first duty of all Americans is to protect American citizens and elected officials, but you realize if you're a politician that if you stand up, that you've walked into his trap.
You know, Joel and his leftist MoveOn.org stuff would be mad at him. Like that's the point, is that these politicians knew the right thing to do,
right,
and agreed on the politics of it, but their base would have punished them if they would have supported something because they hate Donald Trump so bad. And I think we see that on both sides of the aisle.
Donald Trump,
should they have stood, Joe?
Oh, I think they stood plenty. I think you saw plenty.
I
think in that moment, Donald Trump is trying to have a conversation on his terms about immigration. That is not the reality.
Like nobody even.
Sure.
There was no. Let me look around.
Adriana, that is not the way that many Americans process the tough choices that come with litigating our immigration system about, do you care about native-born Americans versus people who are not from? That is not how. That is not how a majority.
Hold on. What he said is people who are here illegal.
Wait a minute.
Those are his
excuse me.
deportation
That is not
policies.
how 54% of people in a CBS poll that they just cited view the world.
His policies on
More people
deportation.
agree with them
hold
than they agree with the president.
This is, you guys like to focus on deportation. I understand that. That's less popular than securing our border. Those are two things that are connected, but they're different things. The vast majority of Americans approve of his policies to secure the border. Like, hands down.
That's great,
and so,
which actually makes it surprising that Donald Trump has lost the threat on immigration, because he does have a stronger card to play, and he's choosing not to do that.
With regards to that closing, the closing of the border, it almost feels as if what Donald Trump did was a reaction to decades of mismanagement when it came to immigration by both Republican and Democratic presidents alike. They all talked about it, going back to George W. Bush, Barack Obama. Everybody talked about what they were going to do at the border, and yet we saw a record number of migrants coming into this country. He shut it down. It almost feels like an overreaction, but to the people who are supportive of it, they would say, well, look, you had 30, 40 years to do something, and you didn't do anything.
I think it's pretty clear that the moderate, kind of majoritarian immigration position is to the left of where Donald Trump is, and probably a bit to the right of where a lot of Democrats are. The electorate, where Barack Obama was, which is you should be strong on executing a tough border, and you should also be strong about allowing people to have a reasonable path to join this country. That is where most of the country is, I believe, and I think Donald Trump is off course from that right now.
Yeah, but look, at the end of the day, it's maybe an overcorrection, but it is a correction to some really broken policies that allowed way too many people in, that turned a blind eye to illegal activity, and then these cities that say no, we're not going to, that are these mayors who are saying, and governors, don't cooperate. Wes Moore in Maryland, it is don't cooperate with federal law enforcement officers in getting illegal immigrants. Like, what is that? Why would you?
But isn't Terry, the reason why they say that is because, as you saw in the Democratic response last night, that maybe the efforts of the federal government should go into training these federal law enforcement officers to discern from somebody who's really what they said they were going to do, which is deport the worst of the worst, and not children
is killing
at
people.
schools.
Sure, but hold on, hold on. Look.
You want a governor to commission someone to help them kill their citizens?
It's a governor saying don't work with. Look, if you cared about the situation, then you want your local law enforcement to be involved in it, to work with them and say, hey, look, we're going to help you. Let's do it under these parameters instead of saying.
Abigail Spanberger, any Democratic governor in the country should feel uncomfortable about protecting their citizens from an abusive federal government.
I think this is such an important debate.
Really important debate.
We need
Always
to
love
have a podcast.
having both of you.
Somebody's got a plane to catch, so we're going to wrap this segment. But Joel Payne and Terry Sullivan, thank you
Always
as
great to have
always.
you
We
both.
love
Thank you.
being able to chat with you and watch you chat with each other, especially.